today's video is going to be a bit different to usual, and it's actually my first time doing a first impression on a JP character that has only just been added to the game. Now, I don't normally do this type of thing, but I'm definitely going to make an exception here because it kind of screwed me over a bit. And that's because the newest JP character that just has been added is another version of SP Kenma. So obviously, we already have one version of SP Kenma, which is a Sakura version. Global literally just had the banner finish a couple of days ago. But now on JP, they just released the second version of SP Kenma, and this one's under the theme of like a school exam, etc. Okay, now this is very, very important for pretty much all of the players out there, because after looking at the kit for this character, I realized it's actually very similar to the original version, but does everything better. Okay, so obviously power creep is a thing in this game, and also the second thing is, like, even if you don't care about the strength of character just from a collection point of view, now that you know a character can have multiple copies but just under different themes, you may also want to plan your pools a bit better, because for some of you, you may wanting to summon just for your favorite character. However, you don't actually realize their care. You're literally just summoning for them because he's your favorite character from the show. Now you can think about it again, because even if you don't summon for them, there's a high chance that in the future he will get another release under a different theme, under a different costume or outfit, and maybe with a better kit that you may actually enjoy more. Okay, so just bear that in mind when deciding which character you actually want to summon for in future. Now, in the case of SP Kenma, this definitely screwed me up quite a bit because I wasn't planning for this, so I actually went quite far on my Sakura Kenma summon, trying to get him to high skill resonance. Yeah, now that looks like to be a bad decision because this Kenma just so much better in every single way. Okay. Now, in terms of the way I'm going to do this video, obviously it's going to be very much series crafted because the character initial has only just been released. So this is very much a first impression. Nothing has been tested or validated. So do take that with a pinch of salt, especially when you actually, if you're actually playing on JP and want to use my advice as a way to decide whether or not you actually going to summon for this. Just bear in mind, nothing I say in this video has actually been tested. It's a lot of them. It's just literally going to be my series craft and first impression. Okay, so let's start with his skill 2 and also skill 4, because his skill 1 and skill 3 are a bit more complicated, so I'll talk about that later on. His skill 2, basically he has a receiving skill now. Now when he does that receive, your teammate's set is going to increase and also stamina will be recovered. Now the thing with this is that you cannot have the same character perform 2 actions in a row. So if Kenma is the one receiving, that basically means someone else on your team will be setting, and that already kind of tell you Kenma is probably going to be slightly better on those teams where you have a second setter where your liberal is capable of setting. Okay. Now, then let's take a look at skill 4. This is an ultimate skill. You have a base power of 240, and also if your allies receive is perfect, then what's going to happen is that the set is guaranteed to be a crit and also does not consume cooldown. Now, this is actually really, really strong because in Kenma's kit, in his skill 3, which I'll talk about in a bit, he actually has a way to guarantee your receive to be perfect once every single rally. So essentially, this can allow you to do essentially one ultimate set, and even if you don't win that, no cooldown will be consumed because your receive was perfect, and then you have the chance of going in straight into another set, which is also going to be ultimate attack. Okay, so essentially you have the chance of spamming 2 ult in one row, 2 ult consecutively in that rally. So this is definitely very, very strong, and this can happen every single rally as well. Furthermore, that was the result if your receive was actually perfect. However, even if your receive is not perfect, what's going to happen is, yeah, sure, you will actually consume a cooldown, but at the same time, you will ask to increase your set power by 200%. Okay, this is a massive buff. This is a crazy buff, and also this will also gain you guys some support stats, which I'll talk about in a bit what that means. But already you can tell from this is that no matter what was going to be the condition, whether it's perfect or not perfect, it's a really, really nice benefit at the end of the day. Okay, so this is very good in terms of ultimate setting skill. Now let's talk about his skill 1 and also his skill 3, which is all revolving around the support stacks. Okay, so how do you get the support stack? So obviously one of getting it is from his ultimate skill, which I just mentioned, but there are also going to be 2 other ways of getting it, which is going to be the first paragraph of their skill 1 and also skill 3. Okay, and it's pretty much the same thing, just different condition. But basically skill 1 says when the result of any of your action is not bad, and also the next teammate has a receive skill, what's going to happen happen is that you get a buff of 10% and also get 1 stack of support. However, if it's not just not bad, but actually perfect, what's going to happen is that you're also going to get an additional 15% and also 2 stacks of support, okay? So if you combine the two, basically what's saying is that if you actually happen to get perfect action and the next teammate has a receive skill, you're going to get a 25% buff and also 3 stacks of support. However, if it's not perfect, it's just a normal. So basically it's not bad, it's just normal. What's going to happen is that you only get 10% buff and also only 1 stack of support, okay? So that's basically how you are able to build up. Now, something you guys may be wondering is that how likely is to actually achieve that, because the next teammate has to have a receive skill. Now, obviously, as you can see here, Kenma does have a receive skill himself. So that basically means this can definitely apply as long as your receive is not bad, okay? Because your setter, like you're going to be Kenma, would have a receive skill. And also this is obviously also going to apply for all of your blocks, because after your block, the next action is going to happen. It's going to be someone receiving, which is going to be 99% going to be someone having a receiving skill, okay? So this is actually quite easy to trigger. The other thing to also bear in mind is that let's say your set is not bad, then this would then go on to a spike. And the same with spikers right now in the game is that probably all of the meta main spikers are going to have a receiving skill, okay? Because we are normally going to be talking about the likes of, you know, SP Hinata, we're talking about SP Hoshiyumi Kurai, we're talking about Sakusa, etc. Okay, so a lot of the spikers in this game that is commonly used, even for the likes of SP Bokuto, Kunami as well. Okay, so slightly less meta, but still very strong choices. They all have their receiving skill, and I'll probably say probably a good 80% of the strongest spiker in the game in the SP era all have receive skill, and that basically means this is actually quite easy for you to trigger as well. Okay. Now, so that's basically how you can get support. What does this support actually do? So this support can actually be used in 3 different ways, okay? So the first way you're going to use it is that you'll be getting 10% awareness and 10% reflex for each stack of support, and this can be up to maximum 60%. This already power crept the original Sakura version of Kenma by so much. The Sakura version needs 15 stacks of his buff, and that can only get you as high as a 22.5%. This can have a maximum of 60%, and if you actually have his skill resonance, I can tell you it's gonna be pretty much a minimum 30% throughout the entire match. Okay, so this alone by itself is already so much easier to trigger and also so much higher than what the original version of Kenma is able to do, and that was literally the biggest selling point for Sakura version of Kenma, and now this Kenma V2 completely power crept that. Okay. Now, that's just one way of how you can do it. The second way is obviously when you have that support effect, you are also able to increase your set up to a maximum 15%. In fact, I wouldn't even classify this as a second way of using support. This is just kind of like a permanent buff that you're able to get. It's actually very, very easy to build this up. I will talk about it in a bit. But actually, the real second way of actually using your support effect is actually that in skill 3, if you actually read the second sentence, what it says is that when he's on the call, at the end of each rally, all of the support stacks will be consumed. And what's going to happen is that at the next turn or the next rally, every single support stack that was consumed, what's going to happen is that you get 1% increase in terms of, I think that should be saying strength and also spirit up to maximum 40%. Okay, and it's actually very, very easy for you to build this up. I'll probably say vast majority of the time you'll be looking at these like, you know, maybe 15 to 20%, 20 stacks every single time. So vast majority of the time, I will be expecting a solid 15 or 20% into both of your crit damage in terms of offensive action and also defensive action. And that's almost like a permanent buff as well, okay? So that's also very strong. But then the third usage of the support stat is probably the most broken of them all. And what this is saying is that if your teammates receive results is bad, what can actually happen is that once per rally, all of the support stats can actually be consumed, and then the receive is changed to perfect. Now this is crazy strong because this is actually very, very similar to the mechanics that SSR version of HAIKYU has, but this is even better because what SSR HAIKYU was able to do is convert a normal receive into a perfect receive. This can actually convert a bad receive into a perfect receive. And vast majority of the time, when you're getting a bad receive, that normally means you're about to lose a point. Okay, vast majority of the time, when you have a bad receive, you're going to lose that point. And if you're able to convert that bad receive into a perfect receive, That's a massive, that's giving you a second life, okay? And something I noticed when I was reading this through, I don't know whether the devs were trying to do this um, intentionally, but I just find it quite funny, so I want to say it out. You know the saying that cat has 9 lives, right? In this game, vast majority of the time it's first to 5 points, which basically means you have 5 lives because you can lose up to 5. Well, you only lose the match when you actually lose all 5 of your points. But now for every single rally, what's going to happen is that you would also essentially get an additional life because the result, even if your received result is bad, it'll still be converted to perfect. And you can obviously do that for the first 4 rally because if you actually lost the fifth rally, you will lose the entire match. So what's going to happen is that essentially this effect is going to give you 4 extra lives in the match and then add on the original 5 lives that you normally have. In total, you basically have 9 chances to lose a point. So that basically, I don't know, it's just for me, it feels like a reference to the saying "cat has 9 lives," right? I don't know. I'm just saying thinking too much here, but I personally found it quite funny how the game actually designed it. If it's actually intentional, obviously. But anyway, this to me is a very very broken skill. Now, one thing people have complained in the past about how Yaku's receive mechanics is not as good as Sims is because even when you do a perfect receive, what can happen is that your setting is then only a normal, and then that actually means even though you manage to save yourself from losing a point on that receive, you are essentially just delaying your inevitable loss by 1 or 2 extra action because your set is only going to be normal, your spike is only going to be normal, and vast majority of the time that will just end up to a perfect enemy's block kill. Okay, however, that's not going to be quite the case for SP Kenma anymore because SP Kenma actually has a memory which basically says for every single rally, the very first time when you do a perfect receive, your set is also going to be perfect. Okay, and in this game, when you have a perfect set, your spike is guaranteed to be perfect. So all of a sudden, this actually kick off a chain reaction where even if you get a bad receive, so you're about to lose a point, this will get converted to a perfect receive. Then using the ability from the memory, this is going to convert to a perfect setting. And then perfect set by default means perfect spike. And that gives you a high chance of them winning the point. Okay. So this completely reversed the circumstance where you're about to lose a point to all of a sudden you're very likely to actually win a point. Now, obviously, this is all like how I interpret it in theory. I think we probably still need to actually test it to see whether or not this actually works in practice. But at least on paper, this feels to me like probably one of the most broken skill in this game so far. Okay, so that's just going to be my take on this. And let's move on to skill resonance. Skill resonance 2, I think is actually going to be very, very crucial for Kenma. And that's because when you actually have it, first of all, for each stack of support you consume, you're going to increase your spirit by 2%, maximum 40%. That's pretty standard. However, the broken part is more that at the start of rally, you're automatically going to get either 5 stacks of support or 3 stacks of support, depending on whether or not you're ahead over opponent or you're actually behind. I think if you're tied on points, it's counting as you're behind, so you get 3 stacks, but that's potentially something to be validated. But essentially what this means is that you are guaranteed to have some support stacks as soon as the match begins, or as soon as the rally begins. And that's really, really important because if you actually think about that, if the enemy is surfing against you, what's going to happen is that unless you actually have skill resonance 2, otherwise you wouldn't actually have any support stacks when you do your very first receive. And that essentially means that you may not actually be able to trigger skill 3 if your receive is actually bad. Okay, so that kind of basically means the enemy is getting a service ace. However, as soon as you have this basically means 2 things. One, the enemy can never get a service ace over you because there's no way you get a bad receive from the enemy serve because you are guaranteed to starting off with support stack, which can immediately be converted into a perfect receive. Okay, so this is the very crucial thing, number one. The second number thing, which is that this is very crucial in the sense that this allows you to guarantee you will always have minimum 3 stacks on you all the time. Because even let's say if you end up with a bad receive, what's going to happen is that this will be converted into perfect, and because you have a perfect, and then assuming Kenma is the one that will be setting after you receive, Kenma has a receive skill. That basically means you're going to then get 2 stacks of support from his skill 3 and also another stack from skill 1 and potentially even higher depending on whether or not your spiker also has a receiving skill. Okay, but that basically shows you are minimum guaranteed to get minimum 3 support because even if you consume them, you just get 3 stacks back immediately. And that's very important because that means at all times you're always going to get a 30% buff in your awareness and reflex. That's so much better than what the Sakura version of Kenma is able to do, which, like I said, even at the biggest stack you are able to build, that's only 22.5%. Okay, and that doesn't even provide any awareness. That was only reflex bar. So that's kind of why I actually think this is very, very valuable. And of course, remember, if you actually have those support, they will also be turned into other buffs at the end of turn as well. So that's kind of why this, to me, is just a very, very strong resonance skill. You're able to essentially have a permanent 30% built-in awareness and reflex, and also guarantee that the enemy can never do a service ace. Okay, now skill resonance 4 to me is a bit okay-ish. It's not as broken as skill resonance 2, but basically when your set is actually perfect, you're able to get buff in terms of the strength and also quick attack. This by itself is actually decent. Now the other thing is that when you actually do a receive, you're also gonna increase by your next receive power by whooping 200%. Now this buff is massive. The only thing is I'll question how often your Kenma would actually be doing his receive, because the vast majority of the time you will be building Kenma with a setter's potential build, etc. Right? You wouldn't be building him with any receive power, and then as a result, your priority for your receive are likely going to go into a liberal and other characters instead. So that's kind of why, even though this looks very, very strong on paper at least, I just question how often can you actually trigger that. But once again, that's potentially something for people to actually test and validate in real matches.